moment ago, Deb and I had apologies this morning from Parminder. Nothing as yet from Sean, but we'll wait and see. Then we have disclosures of interest. Mine are the usual ones. Alan usually has them.
You're mute, Alan.
Any other disclosures of interest?
Yes, the same as usual, Keith. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, and mine. Okay, well, if we're happy with that, we'll move on to item 2, the forward plan, and I think Neil is going to take us through that. So over to you, Neil.
Yep. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Neil.
You're all well. Neil. Let's see if I can share this paper then. Bear with me a moment.
Are the papers not already on the council's website?
Yes, actually they were. That's another thing which perhaps we should, yeah. But of course, you then have to look at them on screen unless you're prepared to have your printer overheat, you know, because I mean, there are, what, I forget how many pages there are now, but there's a hell of a lot pages. So,
Total.
right. You know, that's quite a lot of printer ink and, you know, pressure on the old domestic printer, I think.
No, I was just thinking if it depending on how people are working, sometimes if they've got 2 screens and things, they can maybe able to look at them. But I know we've all got different setups.
Yeah, indeed, Molly. Yeah.
Some of us have wives who are using the other ones as well.
Yeah. I mean, quite often when I'm on other meetings, I have, because I've got my laptop and an iPad that I don't have 2 screens, one laptop, one iPad, and I look at the papers on the iPad. But I've just got 4 members who'd asked for papers, although I did talk to Chris about this, and I don't know how many other Warwickshire committees or boards have papers sent out sort of in hard copy. Deb, do you know, are we in a small minority of asking for papers?
Most are sent out in paper form, Keith. Yeah.
Oh right, okay, yes. Okay. Well, in that case, we're not just we're not just sort of a pain in the butt then. Okay. No. Over to you then, Neil.
Thank you, Keith. Just the usual introductory report. I'm sharing the appendix. What we've included on here this time a bit more is the policies that we would hope to review on a rolling basis going forward. And also some training. You'll know that we've got training on the 28th for climate change with Hymans. I'm hoping everybody's had the invites for that. And then we'll still looking at training. We'll put some more stuff in there as the year progresses.
That's on Thursday then, isn't it? The Hymans thing.
Yeah, it is in the afternoon.
Remind us of what time that is.
I think is it about 2 o'clock.
2:30.
Send confirmation for that.
Yeah, I mean, again, and apologies, you won't all know this, but I couldn't find my login details this morning, so
okay.
Deb kindly sent to me, and apologies for bothering you again on that, Deb. That was my fault. But maybe you know, on Thursday, if the login details could be sent to people, because if they come in on emails, they tend to get buried by others coming in after them, you know. So if you could have something perhaps on Thursday morning, that would be helpful.
Could I give my apologies for the training? I'm sorry, it clashes with cabinet, and I've got to be at cabinet. So
okay, Dave. Okay, well that's understandable. Thank you. Well, you don't need to give apologies for training necessarily, but that's very nice of you. Yeah, no. Thank you very much. No, we appreciate that.
As a bit of an aside on the training side of things, what I'm tending to do now is if I see any kind of relevant seminars that are coming round, I'm sending those out to all the committee and board members as well. So I hope that's okay. Yeah,
I was going to draw attention to that under AOB. So thanks for doing that, Neil. That's very, very helpful. Again, maybe if it's not too much to ask, if the officers could send out reminders, you know, either the day before or something like that, or just to prompt people and let them see the login details and whatever. That again might be helpful.
Okay, yeah, I'll try. I'll make a note of that, Keith. Yeah. And I'll
Okay,
do
if you can, we won't count on you to do it because you've sent them already. But if you can, I think that would be additional help.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else to say? I mean, it's our work plan, but our forward plan. Any other comments to make on that, Neil?
No, just if anybody's got any comments on it, we can move on, Keith.
Okay. Well, I'll now open it to the board members to ask if any of you have any questions, or indeed, have any points to make or suggestions to make, or things that you think should be covered that aren't covered, and so on. Does anybody have anything to say on that? Silence sounds like consent.
Good.
So well done, Neil. And we move on to agenda item 3, the business plan, and I think that's going to be Chris. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll just share my screen. So this is the business plan update. We kind of rag rate each of the items on the plan and highlight those where they're not meeting the original objectives. There's 6 items on there where this is the case. Just very briefly highlight those. So the AGM that we ran for the pension fund, we did deliver the AGM, but it didn't go smoothly as we hoped. So we've already had a catch up with colleagues from my team, and we've clarified the support we need for next time, and we'll implement those lessons learned. Employer contributions is another one flagged as amber. Actually, the levels of contributions we're getting are kind of business as usual levels. So from that perspective, things are green. But we flag this as amber because we're not getting all of the contributions we should get. Employer covenants is flagged as amber. We're now progressing the piece of work that we planned a while back. So at the moment, we're looking at the list of employers, which ones have got emission agreements in place, which ones don't, and in particular, prioritising higher risk employers where they've yet to get their emission agreements in place. And where that's the case, we've got 9 agreements relating to 5 employers, which we're prioritising looking at. Growth of alternative asset classes is amber. The issue here is there's a limit to the physical pace at which you can get your money into alternative investments. So if we want to put a lot of money into, say, infrastructure or something like that, you have to find the right funds, the right investments to go into. So that's not because something's going wrong. That's just a natural function of how those asset classes work. We are looking to put 2.5% of the fund, that's about £58 million, into the PIMCO Diversified Income Fund in advance of moving into the Border to Coast Multi-Asset Credit Fund in the summer. So that move will assist us with moving in the right direction with our asset classes, because we'll be moving it from listed equities. The contracts reviews flagged as amber, and the issue there is just concern around, do we have the capacity to physically review and retender all of our contracts? And lastly, we flagged the commissioning approach. So the commissioning style of kind of managing things is the County Council's current approach to things. And because it's the first year for doing it, that's flagged as amber. These kinds of things take a number of cycles, so in this case, a number of years to mature, and it's early stages. The next time you see the business plan, it will be a new plan for next year. We've had the governance action plan and various other things to help us to focus on the right things. What we'll be aiming to do for next year is snap all of those different things down back to one single action plan. So that's what we hope to bring you next time. That's everything I had to say by way of introduction. I have to take comments or questions.
Thank you, Chris. Well, Chris has highlighted the items that are shown as amber. So first of all, to get some sort of structure to this, does any board member have any question or any comments to make regarding those items which Chris has alluded to, the amber items, which on the list were items 1, I think, 15, 16, 20, 30, and 33. I may have missed something, but that's just to help you, give you a moment to look at those. Any comments or questions on the amber items, first of all?
Chair, you've got hands raised from Mike Snow and Councillor Parsons.
Thanks. I'm not good at spotting the hands. I can see them now, yes. So, okay, well, you mentioned Mike first. So, Mike, you first, please.
Yeah, thank you. No, thanks for going through all that. My question is really probably on item 30 about the contracts, really, and noting that some have expired. And I'm just trying to sort of understand, what are the implications of that? If we've got contracts that have expired, does that mean the service has ceased being provided? And it's just obviously the learning point to, make sure we don't get in the situation for the future, isn't it? As to, planning ahead to avoid getting into the situations of contracts expiring. Obviously, noting that the last 12 months has been somewhat exceptional in terms of way we've had to work, but Indeed. It's just, trying to just seek some assurance as to what's happening in the future to make sure we, don't get in the situation of contracts expiring and and just having to roll them on or whatever we have to do.
Yeah, so
point, Chris.
There's no issue in terms of continuity of service. So where a contract expires, we'll continue to operate on a rolling basis. So the service still continues. The issue that you have where you don't relet contracts when you plan to is that the purpose of reletting them is to make sure that the value for money we're getting remains high, that the services that we're getting remain focused on what the fund needs now, not what it needed 5 years ago, and so on. So there are implications, but they're not immediate. They're not kind of severe or hard implications. But yes, and one of the issues from the governance review we did a year or two ago was identifying the fact that we just didn't have enough capacity to service all the different functions of the pension fund. That speeds up quite significantly. So really two things have upshotted from that. One is we're delivering a lot more. We're hitting a lot more of our objectives than we used to. But the other is in having the capacity to look at the list of contracts, get them onto our contract management system properly, and also look at our schedule of policies and put them into a schedule of review properly. That's highlighting to us just how much there is to do that wasn't really clear before. So I think on the administration side, we've got the capacity right-sized, and where we're doing projects, we're bringing in the capacity to run those projects. The thing that I would highlight that I'm thinking about most is if we've got enough capacity on the investment management side internally and the governance side to kind of keep supporting governance, keep supporting those policy reviews and service all of these contracts, because it's a high workload letting a tender properly, following all the procedures, specifying the service and doing the competition.
Thank you, Chris. Can you give us an instance of just one contract? What sort of contracts are we talking? Can you just instance one for us so that we know what we're talking about in practice?
Yes. So, for example, if you look at the contract, the head-on contract for financial advice for the pension fund, that's currently provided by Hyman's, and that's one where all other things being equal, we would have relet that a year or two ago. We didn't want to relet it at that time because we were right in the middle of the Border to Coast fund launches, and changing that advisor at that moment we didn't think was helpful. And there's also the issue of limited capacity to physically do it. So that's an example.
Okay, thank you. Are you happy with that, Mike?
Yes, no, thank you, Chris. Just knowing that as I say, it's, knowing there's a sort of plan moving forward to keep on top of these. But thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave, you had a question.
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, it's basically about the 10 employer contributions not received. I mean, you sort of said this was more or less business as usual, Chris. Is it an increasing trend, or is it just what we're sort of used to really at the moment?
At the moment, it appears to be relatively business as usual. So we looked at an age debt analysis of employer contributions on a monthly basis. That wanders up and down monthly. If you look at it over the last year, there's no systematic change. We were worrying about a systematic increase in employer problems when COVID appeared. but so far it hasn't manifested. What seems to have happened is we've got a small number of employers who have difficulties. That number hasn't significantly changed. And where an employer already had difficulties, they've added COVID to the list of reasons why they've got difficulties.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions on the amber issues?
Chair, Alan Kidner's got his hand raised.
Alan, thank you. Thank you, Deb. Alan, over to you.
I was also going to ask about the employer contributions. So to some extent you've covered that. I actually looked at the breaches log online yesterday and I counted 25 rather than 10. That's 25 over the period from last April that's covered on the currently available breaches log.
Yeah, that may be an issue with how the 10 is counted and how the 25 is. So I can have a look at that and clarify for you what the difference is between how they're counted.
It may be you're counting employers and I'm counting instances.
It could be that, or it could be one is everything in the year and one is a snapshot. But I'll look at that and do you a note explaining what the difference is. Yeah,
if we could have it, if you could just do that and a short, easily understood explanation on that. And if we need to come back to it at the next meeting, we can. But hopefully, it's something that can be resolved online.
That's fine. Thank you.
Anything else, Alan? Alan, anything else? No?
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody have any to raise on the green items? Because we've been focusing on the amber items, but anything on green? If not, I've just got one comment or question, really. Chris, you mentioned when talking about alternatives, excuse me, a bit of a sore throat this one. Well, not sore throat. It's Qatar, don't worry. But you cited infrastructure and looking at infrastructure, I know sort of nationally, there's been a lot of talk about trying to get some sort of national platform, and there is one. I think it was called, I forget what it's called now, but we're also border the coast. I mean, for funds the size of ours to make infrastructure investments is quite challenging. A bit easier for the pool to do it because of size, and easier still for the community to do it. Any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to the government's drivers for pooling in the first place, national investment in infrastructure was one of their pushes. And the way it's played out is just about everything else the government's pushing for, they've pushed through on pooling, but pension funds have managed to avoid getting dragged into throwing money at infrastructure to service a national objective rather than pension fund objectives. But when it comes to infrastructure, we've got the opportunity to do things through the pool now, which gives us the advantages of scale, or more advantages of scale than we had before. The challenge the pool's got, though, is the same as it's got with any fund, trying to shape and structure a fund with the right risk and return profile to hit the objectives of enough partner funds that they will do something that enough of us will sign up to. But we have signed up to investing more into the border to coast alternative funds. And now what we need to watch is cash flow and capital calls from our existing alternative commitments. So if you look at Harbour Vest, Partners and Alcentra, we've committed significant amounts and there's still amounts remaining to be drawn down. And what we need to make sure is that that doesn't suddenly ramp up a lot and then we end up with more flying into alternatives than we intended to. At the moment, everything is looking steady.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. Any other questions or points on this item before we move on? Okay, if not, well, thank you, Chris, and obviously you'll get back to us on the point that Alan raised. Right, well, that was item 3. We'll move on to item 4, risk register. I think this is you again, Chris.
Yeah, so this is an update on the mainstream fund risk register and a specialist COVID risk register. The main risk register was originally set in February before COVID, and if you look at the difference between the scores then and the scores now, they've predominantly either gone up or remained the same. So risk levels are kind of higher since COVID hit. If you look at the COVID risk register, we wrote that risk register originally, obviously after COVID had started, and we knew what the risks might be. And if you look at the risks when we started that risk register and look at them now, the risks are generally either the same or lower than they were when COVID kicked off. Because we've got experience of how it's worked, a number of things are less certain. But I'll come back to COVID in a minute because of the second wave and the longer term issues. But just starting with the mainstream risk register, the headings remain the same as the beginning of the year. There's no fundamentally new risks added. Scores have been updated through the year and some have moved. One thing I would say is I would prefer that we at some point move to a single risk register, because the more time goes by, the more COVID becomes a natural part of the environment, one of many things. And it also may be simpler for us to administrate and think strategically if we've got one risk register. But for now, off the back of requests from the committees, we're still sticking with these two separate registers. So for general risks, for non-COVID specific risks, the areas where risks have gone up is asset value falls, so long or short-term falls. The key thing there is we want to avoid selling assets under stress, selling equities when they're very volatile. We've managed to do that. We've got diversification that protects us with this issue. We've got a suitable strategy thinking about the longer term. We're also going to be reviewing our strategic asset allocation this year. There's a risk of poor performance, particularly on equity funds. It's difficult to draw too many conclusions about the border to coast actively managed funds at the moment for a couple of reasons. One is that they're fairly early days and we're thinking about long-term performance, not short-term performance. And the other is the high and unusual volatility, the unusual market behaviour in the last year, which makes assessing anything over the long term a bit more difficult. But that remains quite high on the risk register. As I mentioned in the business plan thing, a key thing I'm flagging is risk around capacity on the investment side. So that's something that we're having a look at. The other risks that are higher are fraud, the risk of liabilities increasing faster than assets because interest rates and gilt rates are so low, and the issue of service disruption. So we've done very well with business continuity and the fund's done very well so far with keeping the show on the road. But the fund is small in the scheme of things. Some of the teams are small, some of the functions are specialist. So single person risk, continuity risk remains high. So that's the general risk register. And briefly on COVID risks, the things I'd flag there is the longer term impacts are not yet fully understood. Markets have swung around, but what the long-term impact is still not clear. Also, if you look at staffing morale, I think it has been relatively good, but this second lockdown, it's fair to say, I think is having more of an impact on more people. So staff morale is a higher profile issue, I think a higher risk. And again, single person risk is a key issue. Those are the only things I would highlight from the risk register. So I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Any questions from anybody or comments on either of the registers?
Chair, Councillor Parsons has his hand raised.
Thank you, Deb. Dave?
Thank you, Keith. Yeah, just looking at item 2, the increased volatility, on my side of the political divide, the Brexit deal is sort of in inverted commas a thin deal, and it seems to me that it's looked at the manufacturing side of things, the flow of trade, What it doesn't cover yet is the financial services, which is a very, very big part of our economy. So it would seem to me that that's still a big area of volatility. I don't know how you would see that, Chris, but I would have thought that was still quite a big risk until that one is sort of sorted out a bit.
Yeah, that remains a big risk, and it is on the radar. A couple of things to say about it, though, are firstly, the pension fund is quite heavily weighted to UK equities. However, if you look at UK equities, in particular big cap, bigger companies, a lot of their revenues and business isn't actually inside of the UK. Correct. So if you put that together with the fact that we've got relatively big stakes in overseas equities, we don't have a huge amount of exposure to the UK individually. The other thing I'd say is, although Brexit is an issue and is causing volatility, probably the bigger issue, or the two bigger issues, are COVID and international trade tensions fundamentally. China and the US, those kinds of things, I'd say, are having a bigger impact.
Yeah. Thanks, Keith. Chris, sorry.
Yeah, I think Mike has his hand now raised as well. Mike?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, just a couple of points. One, a bit of a general one. It's just interested in obviously noting the scoring in the risk registers. Invariably, they have to be somewhat subjective. So I just wonder if you can say sort of a few words about, what's the sort of process that you go through in trying to assess those scores and who's involved in it, and sort of what evidence there is to try to support those. I know it's no perfect world at all trying to do it, but it's just trying to, how you try and make that as objective as possible. And then just on a more specific point on the risk 6, you're saying about the fraud, and of course highlighting that one. It's just, again, it's sort of, what's, as a pension fund, what can we actually do to try to reduce that risk as much as we can, and what action, what mitigations do you have in place?
Yeah. Okay. On the first question of how we score, so the scoring is done by fund officers. So that will include people like, say, myself, Victoria Moffat, and others, and we'll review the scores on a quarterly basis. The scoring, I think I've got the matrix set out down here. So we've got this fairly simple, unlikely, possible, likely, very high, high, medium, low assessment. So that's as far as it goes, and we'll apply kind of professional judgment stroke common sense using those headings. It's worth saying we've done a review of the risk framework for the County Council itself, and that has included setting for the council something called a risk appetite, which it never had before. We're looking at a revised risk management framework, including a different matrix to this. Instead of being 4x4, it's 5x5. And instead of being subjective like this, where you have the impact, instead of being, for example, very high, high, medium, the impact is categorized by financial impact. If it's more than X million, it's very high. If it's more than Y million, it's low, whatever. So trying to use empirical things that require less interpretation. So something that we will have a look at is whether or not we're able to jump onto that methodology next year or something closer to it. So that's how things are scored at the moment on a judgment basis based on that table in section 4. Okay. On the questions, is that okay? Is any other questions on that?
No, I think that's good. I know it's very difficult to sort of score these things, and it's not perfect science, and and I think at the end of the day, what's probably more important, I always think, is the actual mitigations that you can actually put in place, because you can spend as long as you like trying to score things, but it doesn't really make that much difference, does it? It's it's what you can actually do to manage those risks.
Absolutely right, spot on, Mike. Yeah. Okay, is that Alan's hand I can see raised?
Sorry, there was one other question I didn't answer on fraud.
Sorry.
So on fraud, the fund already has controls in place to manage fraud. So, for example, on the administration side, we're requiring certain information and evidence from members in order to undertake certain tasks. On the investment side, we have signatory lists and controls around who can authorise what. We have things like callbacks from our custodian. So every now and again, I'll get phone calls from the NYM double checking, investments that we're planning to do and so on. So we've got those controls in place. There aren't any changes to our controls that we've made that I'm aware of fundamentally off the back of COVID. What the risk register flags is that the risk of fraud is higher. So, and unless any colleagues correct me, there's nothing we've kind of added to the fraud framework at the moment.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank
Chris.
you. Okay, you happy with that, Mike?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, well, whilst you're on fraud, cybersecurity, I don't see it specifically listed anywhere. Does that come under fraud, or because obviously that could be a major risk?
Yes, so that would be one type of risk of fraud. So we've got the cybersecurity policy in place that we switched on in the last year, and we've got contacts within IT who are helping us now to try and implement that. But that's one subset of fraud risk.
Okay, thank you. Alan, is it I can see it just says A, but is that you, Alan, with your hand raised?
Yeah, I was also going to ask about fraud. I was struck by the fact it had gone up. So I got my magnifying glass out and looked at the very small print on the more detailed item on page 23, and it identified the risks with investment managers, the custodian, the brokers, and within the administering authority. And I wondered, if that increased risk could be attributed to anything in particular in those four bullet lists, or if it's just generalized.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question to answer. I may not be qualified to answer it. I guess the two things that would drive the increase in fraud are potentially if controls that you have in place aren't applied strongly because of the impact on COVID on, our capacity, our staffing, our systems still working. So there's the potential for your controls not to operate as effectively because of COVID. And there's also the potential because of COVID for there to be more incentive or motivation for individuals to commit fraud if their circumstances are more difficult or desperate. So that's a couple of things. But
elsewhere in the document packet talked about wet ink signatures or something, and doing away with the need for that. And I wondered if whether that was an increased risk of fraud, the fact that it was being done digitally, and the checks and balances that might be in place to secure that.
Yes. Yeah. So there are certain things that require wet ink signatures where that is still the case, and the systems we've got in place with our counterparties won't allow that to change. So every now and again, we have had to send things around the country or drive around to physically get wet signatures. Sometimes we will use DocuSign, which is a method of electronic signature. Sometimes we will use kind of our own signatures on our Circuits Pros. So there's a few different ways of doing things depending on what the process is. But in the same way that somebody could forge a physical signature, I personally couldn't say if the risk is higher or lower that somebody could access someone else's ability to do DocuSign and those other electronic methods.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, thank you. Sean, did I see that you'd raised your hand?
I had, yep. It's just a very simple question, really. Has there been any actual fraud that you know of, Chris?
On the investment side, no. On the administration side, not that I'm aware of. But if Vicky or Liz have got any closer kind of insight to it, and there's anything that you want to flag, feel free to mention it. What I can do after the meeting is just follow up on that more specifically do a double take on it, because if there was, it would be something to make sure that we are citing on.
Okay.
So from the administration side, there hasn't been any fraud cases picked up. What we have to be careful with is obviously the fact that we like to see original documentation from members. So we like to see original birth certificates or marriage certificates or death certificates to confirm payment of benefits. And we have moved to getting scanned copies of those. So we are looking to introduce a new method for identification verification. So using an online tool that will help with that to mitigate any risk of fraud on those cases.
Okay, thank you. I think Dave has now got his hand up, as does Alan again, but Dave first.
Yeah, actually, it's just a comment. Like Alan, I had to get my magnifying glass out to look at the more detailed breakdown there. And I mean, yes, but for those of us of a certain age, I think we could do with taking up a bit more paper, really, because it's it's a bit of a struggle. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Point taken. I agree with that. Sean, did you come back with another point, or is your hand still up, I think?
My apologies. I'll take it down now.
Okay, it's all right. Just want to make sure. I thought you might have had a second. Does anybody else have any further questions or comments on the registers? Well, if not, I think we've done that. So thank you, Chris. What I'll say is, well, I mean, actually, we did go back to the papers, but when I think it's rather, I find it a little bit odd that we didn't see you at all then, Chris.
It's because I was sharing
I did ask for you to share your paper, so you were doing what I asked. So I accept that. But after you presented the paper, I think perhaps if we could go back to seeing you in person, and then if we need to go back to the papers to deal with any questions, we'll do it that way. But rather than just leave the papers, rather than your good selves on screen, that might be a good idea. Dave, is your hand raised now?
Yeah, sorry to keep coming back, Chair. I'd missed a comment I put at the end of the more detailed risk register. I just wondered the possible implications of commercial property investments at the moment. City and town centres are becoming a bit of a sort of, an issue, to say the least. And with increased home working and the like, it would seem to me that we're likely to see a movement towards residential properties much more in our towns and city centres, and a switch in the use of properties there. I wonder if there's any thought about the possible implications of the value of commercial properties as it might be affected by. I know this is not a certain movement, but it does look as though it's on the way.
Yeah, certainly property investment fund managers have been foreseeing, the reduction in the economy in the high street, as it were, for some time, and have been disinvesting in that kind of thing for some time, and investing more in things like out of town warehouses, and supporting the infrastructure for selling via the internet. And other things like infrastructure such as roads or whatever that are more resilient in the longer run. The fund can, for example, invest up to 5% of its assets in, if it wanted, local impact investing. At the moment, the pension fund's investment strategy is silent on that option, but it's something that could be considered. The issue, though, with that is seeking to align the objectives of the fund that's investing with the objectives of the entity that's seeking investment, and the two have got to connect. So if you looked at local impact investing right now, if it was the county council investing in order to achieve a local impact, it's very easy to align the objectives of the county council with that local impact, because the two naturally, aligned. But the objectives of the pension fund isn't so much, it's to benefit local members, but its objective is pay pensions when they're due and be able to pay pensions when they're due. So it's a bit of a longer road to connect the objectives of both sides. So that kind of thing would be possible to invest in, but how that would play out would be for a review of the investment strategy fundamentally, first of all, consideration of whether it's deemed appropriate to change the emphasis of the investment strategy to enable that direction to be explored, followed by due process and so on.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I mean, I wasn't advocating we do it. I was just questioning the sort of where we find ourselves on this one, really.
Yeah, but certainly fund managers have been getting out of the kinds of things that have gone down following COVID. But what COVID has done is accelerate what fund managers are expecting anyway.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, good question, Dave. I mean, following yesterday's news about Boohoo and Debenhams and so on, I mean, it's difficult to see where the replacement businesses will come into those department stores, which are very large. I mean, Newport, where I live, I'm a Cardiffian, and there's a large Debenhams in the major shopping mall there. But in Newport, it's a much smaller shopping mall, and the whole thing based around Debenhams. Take Debenhams out, and then if you take the Top Shop out, and Mother Carer's gone as well, it's beginning to look like a bit of a white elephant. Nobody's fault, good efforts, but that's from the sort of local authority, sort of economic development point of view, not from the point of pension fund investment, but it is something which is very challenging and difficult to see what the answer will be. But I'm sure there are lots of good minds working on it. Okay, thank you, Chris. Do you have anything else to say?
No, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions on this paper? Okay, if not, we'll move to the next one, which I think this is going to be Vicky, I think, on admin and performance update. Vicky, over to you. And if I can just remind you, as and when you finish the report, if you could then return to your good self, and if we need to return to the report to deal with any questions, then obviously I'll leave you to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair, will do. So item 5 is the Pensions Administration Activity and Performance Update. So Chris has covered off about the Governance Action Plan, that for going forward now, we've completed most of the actions off there. The final one being the implementation of iConnect, which is due to run till June. And following on from that, the items that were listed on that action plan will be consolidated, and a lot of it will become part of our business as usual work. Items to note on this report, obviously the progression of iConnect, that's still going really well, and we're nearly at the point where all WCC payrolls are ready to go live. We're still just doing some matching exercise on the schools payroll and the admin side, which are the bigger payrolls on that system. So that work is due to be completed by the end of this week, and we should be in a position to see all WCC payrolls live on iConnect, so that from February onwards we'll be having the payroll data sent across using this system. We're also obviously planning the work for stage 3. So the employers that are in stage 3 are all having meetings with our employee relations team to make sure that their extracts are ready, that the matching exercises are planned, and that they know what they're doing for the work for getting their iConnect extracts ready to go live. We're also obviously keeping in contact with our stage 4 employers to make sure that they're on track with what they need to do as well, and sticking to the timescales. So again, really good success story with iConnect. It's progressing well, and we would hope that by June everybody is on board, and that will really help with the pensions admin team workload, spreading that out across the year and giving us more opportunity to keep on top of the work as it comes in. Another aspect just to touch on is obviously the key performance indicators. So this is looking at the work that we're doing and whether we're achieving that 95% target. There are a number of areas where we are struggling to hit that target, and there are things that are impacting, the way that work comes in and what we have ongoing within the team. Obviously, these key performance indicators only record things that are task-based through our workflow system. There are areas of work that aren't logged on there, so that can impact on the work that we get through. But just to note that obviously we are seeing an influx because of COVID with the amount of deaths that we're processing. So we did see a spike in both April and October. So that has impacts on, you know, the amount of work that we have to do in getting notifications out to dependents and paying death grants and things like that. So the LGA, the Scheme Advisory Board for LGA, are asking us for our data on deaths, because they are assessing that across the local government to see how COVID has an impact on our pension scheme members, and obviously the work that we're doing. And also another aspect of that is obviously dealing with deaths, you know, paying pensions, dealing with deaths is part of our work that we do. But seeing an influx of those numbers, we are just keeping track with the staff that deal with those to make sure that that's not impacting on them directly, because, you know, the sheer volume of work that they're having to do connected with that. So workloads, if we look at workloads since March, we've processed 37,693 tasks. On average, we create about 900 tasks, and we're completing just over 900. So we are getting into a position where we're completing more than what's coming in. So it's good to see that the staff, now that we've had staff in place now, coming up to almost a year, all the training has been done for the workloads that they need to do, and you know, that's starting to, you know, show dividends in that the more that they learn and the more that they're experienced, they're picking up these things and getting through them. So breaches. So we're still doing a lot of work on how the breaches are recorded and shown on the website. Looking at it, we're trying to make it easier to follow, so that we can see, you know, on a monthly basis, who are our employers that aren't getting the information to us when we need it, and what other areas that they struggle with, you know, if they're not sending through notice of termination and things like that. So we are constantly reviewing how we monitor those breaches, and we're trying to streamline it so that it's easier to follow. So, you know, I understand looking at it from the website, and then when Chris is giving you information, they don't always tally, and it might be that we're not looking at exactly the same things, but we're trying to align it so that it is, you know, for you when you're looking at it as a board, that you can understand what we're telling you about breaches and identifying where we've got issues and making sure we're picking that up. We've had I'll just talk to you about the tracing. We did a tracing exercise, and we've managed to find 90% of the people of our members that we didn't have a current address for. So that was quite a successful tracing service that we've done. So we can now get in touch with those members, send them their benefit statements, and also where some of those members were pensioners, we can get their pensions back in payment. So that's another success story. We're working on the communications policy, so that will be going to staff and pensions, an updated version in March. And obviously the preparations for McLeod are ongoing, and we've got a meeting with Aon tomorrow to start looking at the charter documents and get that kicked off. So those are the main points on the pensions administration. There's some charts at the bottom for you. Nice to see on the appendix 2 a chart that's showing a downward curve. I know we're seeing lots of charts with upward curves at the minute in the news, but for the pensions administration team, it's good to see that actually we're keeping on track with the work that's coming in. So so happy to take any comments or questions.
Well, thank you, Vicky. I mean, obviously, first of all, before passing it on, COVID, we've had lots of information about the management impact of it, but what you've been talking about here really does focus the human side of it, doesn't it? You know, the fact that it's coming through now in a way that that you're seeing. So that's, I think, certainly food for thought. I've just noticed as well, others may have questions on this, but you've given some interesting figures on the costs now estimated for COVID and so on. And I recall that Keith was questioning this, I think, at a previous meeting. But other than just, I don't have anything to say personally on that at this stage. And I'll open it for any questions from board members, please, or comments. Mike.
Yeah, thank you. Right, yes, thank you for that. No, it's good to hear that, and I'm very pleased to hear about the iConnect, which I think is very exciting, which is, should be better for members in terms of being able to self-service, which is good, and obviously good for your team. So I think as soon as that can be rolled out, the better. But so good luck in getting there. But probably just coming back probably on Keith's last question point that he was raising about the McLeod there, which obviously I don't envy you at all the work that's going to be entailed there. It's extremely daunting, but you sort of highlight a cost there of sort of nigh on £500,000, and it's just sort of wondering what sort of time scale or will this work be going over, and just in terms of £500,000, how will you actually recover the money or find the money to actually fund all this work that's needed?
Well, with the McLeod project, obviously, we're looking to implement some team members to start the data collection. So we're looking at probably from April onwards. And then once the regulations get changed, which, is said to be April 22, then from April 22, we'll be doing the benefit rectification side of it. So we're talking at least 2 years to make sure that everything firstly is put into place, that we've got all the data we need to do those calculations for those members that need changes. And then once the regulations are in place, we can do those changes and get those benefits sorted out. But there's a big area on aggregation as well, where members have got records and sitting in different funds or multiple records sat in the same funds being given the option of joining. So that's quite a big task that might take some time. But with regards to the funding of it, we have gone through the corporate board and got funding for the work. Obviously, we are paying for some external project management, which has got the expertise that we need to manage this project. And we've got money coming from the pension fund, but we've got system developments that will need to be costed as well. So all that there is basically, it's gone through the business case, and we've got the funding through from the council. And Liz will back me up on some of that as well, because she knows far better than I do.
Yeah, just to add to that, Mike, the McLeod work splits into two parts really. There's the work to manage the implementation of the remedy for the local government pension scheme, and then there's an element that also relates to our fire pension schemes, and we're running the two things hand in hand, because a lot of the type of work that we're doing will overlap. So for example, all of the data gathering and those sorts of things. The portion that relates to the local government pension fund, we've got agreement that will be paid for from the fund, and the bit that relates to the fire service is obviously nothing to do with the LGPS, and the county council has secured the resource to pay for that element.
Okay, thank you.
Keith, I think your hand is raised.
Yes, thanks. Let me start off with the last point that you were talking about. Sorry to say this, but without having the papers, it's almost impossible to make a sensible comment about that. So I'm not going to make a comment other than I'm on the case. I'm looking at it. I will be looking at it, and it's something that will interest me, and hopefully I'll come back later on that one. Just a couple of points, really. Going back, you were talking about the tasks that you were doing, and you were relatively happy with your state on that. You made a comment which said something like, now the team's becoming fully trained. And I was just interested in how you do that, because I'm assuming that they're working remotely. Is that okay? And I would have thought that was a much bigger issue than it would normally be. That was the first point I was going to make. And just a quick one. On the addresses, the 90%, the obvious question, what about the other 10?
Okay. So the point on your first question about training, yes. Whilst we've been working at home, training, you know, virtually is difficult. It is much easier to sit next to someone and learn a sort of a process. So what we've been doing is obviously making sure that our processes are documented and make sense, and that we work through those processes. So we're doing virtual training. So we'll do it like this. We'll be talking to one another on the screen. We can share screens to show what's happening and look at the different screens that we work from. It has taken longer with some of the training to be picked up, and that's what we've anticipated, obviously, with doing virtual training. But we've got access to lots of different tools to do training. We've obviously got our own team members that are experienced that can do the training with new staff. We've also got within our Altair system a training suite, which will it's called Tech, so people can go through and do modules which will teach them how to do processes as well, so they can do a lot of online training. And we've also got access to external providers of training that will come in and do sessions. So we've had Barnet Waddingham obviously do that local government scheme overview and do training that way. We find that doing shorter sessions is better virtually. If you have a whole day trying to train, you know, literally come lunchtime, you can switch off from picking anything up.
Lunchtime. Come coffee time, I've said, but anyway, go on.
Yeah, so you know, we've picked up that actually people prefer to do shorter training sessions if they're going to do it virtually, and so we're constantly adapting how we deliver that training, and every person trains in a different way. So you know, we've got particular team members that are new. They'll have what we call like a mentor within the team that they can go to with questions if they're learning something, and we'll have particular team members that will deliver certain training, and it is virtual, and it can be on a one-to-one or it can be as a group. So you know, we're constantly learning about how to deliver training, because people will come back and say, look, I really struggled to learn something doing it that way. Is there another way that we could do it? And we do, you know, we look at how we can change bringing that training in.
You're clearly doing very well. I think congratulations on that. I think it's a really difficult thing to do.
So sorry, I forgot your second question, Keith.
The 10%, I think.
The 10%.
So, I'm always bothered about 10%. So
the 10%. So what we've done with the tracing services, we've gone through both a bronze and silver level tracing service. There is a gold level that we could do, but what we're doing first is we're just doing some analysis on those members that we haven't traced yet, to see, just look at their age profile to see if they're people that are going to be due benefits shortly, and so it's more important that we do find them now. If not, if they're younger members that aren't due a benefit straight away, then what we'll do is we'll leave it until we do another tracing exercise, and we'll try and do it again with them. So that's the options we've got with those at the moment. So we're just looking at that group of people just to see, actually, well, yeah, there's probably about 50 of those that we'd want to look at, because they're going to be due a benefit in the next 6 to 12 months, and we want to get those paid to them. So we would look to do that gold level trace on them.
thanks.
You happy with that, Keith?
Yeah. I am.
Okay, well, I think Alan's, well, no, Liz, do you want to come in on that first?
It was only a very quick one, Keith, just to add that we are looking at running the tracing exercise on a regular basis. This is the first time we've done it for a little while, and we need to agree on what the appropriate frequency is. But this won't have been a one-off exercise. We will be repeating it with some regular frequency now.
Thank you, Liz. Yeah, before going on to Alan, whilst we're on training, I was very pleased and encouraged to hear, Vicky, you say that, you know, about this personal approach, because in a slightly different context, but I mean, we are all individuals, and I recall, this won't mean much to anybody, I'm just showing my age here, but before it was SIPFA, it was IMTA, Mike may remember it just about, but when one went into exams, there were at extremes two sorts of candidates amongst my friends. Those who stopped studying the weekend before the exam and didn't do any studying at all during the week, because that was it. They'd done all their studying, they go to the exams. And there were others who took books with them to the exam room and sat outside until the bell went, looking at their books before they went in. two extremes, and it works different ways for different people. So I think that's good to see that these individual preferences are being taken into account. I was always in the latter category, sat outside looking at my books right up to the bell, but we're all different. Anyway, that was good to hear. Alan, did you have a point now?
Yes. Thank you, Vicky, for explaining your work on the breaches log. I appreciate that it's something you're working on. I'm in the habit of taking a look at it prior to the board meetings. So I had a look yesterday, and I've got some questions about it that you probably can help out with. I noticed there's two worksheets in the spreadsheet. The second of which is called the current position. It doesn't have any date on it. And I was wondering if it was based upon the other worksheet or if it is more current than that. Because the other worksheet, I don't think there's anything on the other worksheet. That's the breaches, the monthly breach log. I don't think there's anything on the one that I can see since the end of October.
Right, okay. So the work that has been done on the breaches log, we're trying to bring those up to date, but obviously we're always in a month in arrears because for contributions they have to come in. So if we look at the contributions for December, they'll be coming in by the 19th of January, and it's about the time it takes to get all that logged and updated. So we're always going to be in a state of arrears with the breaches. But we've got two members of staff working on that. A girl called Kelly Harrow's doing a lot of work, and she behind the scenes she's got lots of spreadsheets for breaches, and we're trying to streamline that process so that they can feed into that a lot quicker.
Right.
So I think what I need to do with that is probably take it away and just have a look to see how often that spreadsheet is being updated on the website, because I'm not sure it's quite keeping up with what we've got within the team. So if I can take that question away from you, and I can feed back to you when I've had a word with Kelly just to see what's going on with it, and timing wise where we're at with updating it on the website as well, if that's okay.
So in essence, what we're seeing on the website is the public version, and the version that your team have that they work on is probably more up to date.
Yes, I would say so. Yes, yeah.
So maybe that you can simply initiate a monthly calendar entry where you refresh what's publicly available.
Yes, yeah, and that's what we're trying to work towards. We've had lots of conversations over the last few weeks about how I would like it to look, and how when the information's coming in, how we can streamline, because there seems to be information all over the place, and we're just trying to get it all together. And then obviously once we've got it all together within the team, it gets fed through onto that website information as well to make it clear to follow. So yes, I'll come back to you about that if that's okay.
One of the exercises I did was to sort the breach count in reverse order. So it listed the highest breach counts at the top. And I was interested to note that the highest breach counts, there were 3 with 12 breaches more than 5 weeks and 1 with 11. And then we got to the amber ones, which started at 9 in that column. And I was wondering why the first 4 had no colour. And I was wondering if they should actually be red. Yes,
I think so. And we've got some work to do on this breaches log of how we're recording things, and I think we're still in a process of getting our head around how we're doing that with the volume that's coming in. So I take your comments on board. It's not perfect by any means, and we're still working towards trying to get that in an easy format that we can keep up to date quickly, on a monthly basis. So yes, I'll come back to you about that one and make sure that it's better for next time.
What puzzles me then is that we have a table in front of us in the papers for the meeting, which says 0 red breaches. And there are, in fact, 0 which are actually coloured red or labelled red. But it appears that there are actually 4 breaches that should be red and aren't.
Okay, well, I'll look into that. I mean, a red breach for recording purposes, I just think, is something that we have to take to TPR. So that could be why we're saying 0 in the papers, because there's nothing being reported to TPR at the minute. But yes, I'll need to go away and have a look at that.
So does that mean that you've highlighted it as a potential red, but you haven't actioned with the TPR because you're doing further investigation?
Yes.
Is that what you're... So it's sort of well, yeah, okay. Are you happy with that, Alan? I mean, I think I understand. What you're saying is that you see it as red. Well, Liz, you have your hand raised. Do you have something to add here?
Yeah, just to add to what Vicky's already explained, the escalation process for these breaches, if they're green breaches, we now have in our breaches policy that if an employer is late with their data or contributions by more than a certain length of time or more than X number of times within a given period, then that we will escalate to amber. We keep those under review, and then we look at all of those amber breaches to see whether anything is significant enough to be escalated to red. I don't think we've had any in the amber category that we have deemed to be serious enough to escalate to red at the moment, but we do review those on a regular basis, and if there are any that are falling into that category, then we'll be looking at them at our regular pensions management meetings, and what I suggest is that we make sure, you know, that we take the feedback from the board away from this meeting, and we'll absolutely review all of those amber ones and see if there's anything that that based on our breaches policy ought to be escalated to red.
Okay, I'm slightly confused now because Alan, I thought you were saying there were 4 highlighted as red.
They're not actually coloured in red. They are white. They haven't been categorised. But that's obviously a cause for concern, that it appears that they ought to be red and they're not. So that's why I'm asking.
Alan, are you saying that we or the fund is remiss in not having reported them to TPR already, or are you happy with the explanation, which I understand is that they are still being investigated?
I'm happy with the explanation, but obviously it's a cause for concern that that things aren't what they seem.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, can the officers take that message away, because it goes without saying things should be as they seem.
Yes. I'll take that away, and I'll come back to you, Alan.
Okay, thank you. I've got one other question, I think. Let me find it.
You're on mute, Keith.
Sorry, it's relevant to what we were just talking about. If I understood what's just been said, doesn't that mean that those 4 white ones actually should be amber, because they're being considered to be red?
Yes.
So if they're not red, if they haven't been put into red yet, they should be in amber, which means they should be 4 more in amber. Is that right?
I think if you're looking at which those particular items are, I'm not sure that we can answer that. I think we need to go back and look at the items that Alan's referring to and make sure that we know exactly what those items are and what the assessment should be. Yeah,
well, okay, thanks for that. And perhaps, I mean, we can either have something at the next meeting, but if there is any further information on this that's sent, can I obviously make sure that it's sent to all board members. I think Keith is absolutely right, though. I mean, this is called a traffic light system, and there are only 4 sorts of traffic lights, aren't there? I know that you get the red, but you only 3 lights. Well, there are really 4 lights, aren't there? There's red, amber, green, and not working. And what I want to be sure of here is that they are working, and therefore I think, Keith, it has to be right. If it's something that's being considered to be red, by definition, it's an amber.
Yeah.
You know, but like, if anybody wants to argue against me and Keith on that, I'm happy to listen to the arguments now, but I'm going to take some persuading that he's not right.
I found my final question on this, and it's on the monthly breach log 2021 worksheet. The very top, on the 1st of April 2020, it says Fund Administration, Warwickshire County Council, and description and cause of breach. It says incorrect base rate factors mean late payment interest was underpaid since base rate change on the 2nd of August 2018. And I'm wondering, and there's no number of days on that one, I'm wondering what that means. It sounds rather like it's an unresolved issue since August 2018.
Without that information in front of us, Alan, I think it's a little bit difficult to respond in the meeting to that. Again, if you're okay with it, we'll go away and look at that one and come back to you, because I just don't have that spreadsheet in front of me right now.
Could you just, Alan, could you just give us the reference again so that others can look at it?
It's straightforward for anybody to see who wants to see it. Should I describe the process?
No. Just if you just tell us where it is. You say as much as you think is appropriate.
It's on the monthly breach log worksheet for 2021.
Yeah.
It's on row 9. It's the first of the individual data entries for employers, and it says 1st of April 2020, Fund Administration, Warwickshire County Council, employer number not applicable, and then the description of breach says incorrect base rate factors mean late payment interest was underpaid since base rate change 02/08 2018.
Right. Yeah, I can see where that is, Alan. So I'll go and investigate that. I'm not sure that should still be sat on there, because I think it may have been sorted out. But I'll have to confirm that with you.
Depending on the amount involved, base rate changes have been very small, and differences have been very, therefore, not been great. And also, the period doesn't sound that. I wouldn't have put it like this. I think Alan's absolutely right to raise it, and it needs looking at. But I don't think it's necessarily a great sum. But I'd be interested to find out. I may be totally wrong on that. It depends on the base figure you're talking about, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, so again, we'll come back on that one if that's okay.
In the days when interest rates were 10% or whatever, back in my day, it was rather different to where we are now. The figures that flow from the interest rates are very different now, and the Chancellor at the moment is very happy about that with all his borrowing, I'm sure.
Thank you, Vicky.
Yes, thanks, Vicky. Thank you, Alan. Does anybody else have any questions or comments on Vicky's report? I don't see. Vicky, anything you want to say in winding up, or are you happy with that now?
No, that's all from me. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you. You've covered an awful lot of ground there, and I think the questions have all been posed as constructive criticism, with the emphasis on construction, and trying to help. I think they've been valid questions, all of them, which hopefully you will find helpful. But can I thank you on behalf of the board for all the work you're doing. And there has you know, both prior to your arrival and certainly since your arrival and what have you, and the team has been supplemented. I think I just speak for myself, but I've seen a marked improvement. So I'm very, but that's no reflection on the former officers. Frankly, they were sort of overburdened, I think, and things are much more encouraging. But we will still ask the awkward question if we feel there's one to be asked.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, let's move on then, if everybody's happy to do so. And I think we're back to Chris now, who's going to give us the investment update. Chris, back to you.
Okay, I'll just share my screen.
Yeah, and as I say, when you've finished, if you could do as Victoria did, and if you need to refer back to the screen afterwards, then obviously you can do so in dealing with any questions. Thank you.
Okay, so very briefly, the key things to highlight from this report is, first of all, that our cash flow remains broadly neutral. So if you look at this chart here, you can see contributions refers to contributions in from employers, benefits paid is benefits paid out to members. Those are the two key things to have a look at, and they remain broadly neutral. You can see over on the right for that quarter, investment returns were positive. So although there's been a lot of volatility and there was a big drop in asset values, they have worked their way back up to a very significant degree since they went down. So first message is cash flows remain neutral. That means that we don't have to, at the moment, put too much work into how our investments are structured in order to have to tap into investment returns to back cash flows. A couple of other things to highlight. So we've undertaken the National Knowledge Assessment for officers and committee members, and we're using that information to inform training needs for the next year. We've submitted a return to the CMA, the Competition Markets Authority, to set out that we've set objectives for our financial advisors for the fund. That means the head-on financial advisors, Hyman's, and the independent financial advisors. What we've also done since setting those objectives is have one round of actually assessing progress against those objectives. So we issued a questionnaire to officers and committee members saying, here's all the criteria that we're using to assess the effectiveness of our consultants. What's your feedback on that? So we've got that feedback. Last thing to say about advisors is we have run a procurement process to relet contracts for our independent financial advisors, and that involved interviews before Christmas. I can't announce the results of that at this moment in time, but we do have the results, and we'll be issuing those to the bidders, and then we can do a open communication on the upshot of that. But that tender process is a good example of the benefits of having that contracts reviewing process in place. So that's the first example of getting into looking at contracts and objectively letting them again. Just a couple of other things to mention then are, you'll see further down in this report, our strategic asset allocation. So what this sets out is the different types of investments that we spread our money around in order to mitigate risk and in order to get a structure of risk and returns that suits the objectives of the fund. And when I say objectives, I mean long-term objectives. This second chart is probably the key thing to look at. What this highlights is our actual levels of investment compared to the benchmark. So you can see at the top here, we want 55% of our money in growth. We've got 59. Two things to say about growth is it does what it says on the tin. It's intended as a bucket where you put your money in and it gets bigger over time through returns. But in exchange for that high level of growth, you take higher risk. And how that risk manifests itself in the main is volatility over time. So the fund can bear that risk because it can ride out that volatility over a very long period of time. If you take our pension funds, although COVID's had a big impact, we're able to ride that out and think about the long term. If you were an organisation with our assets but different objectives, then COVID might have hit and might have knocked the whole company out of existence, depending on its objectives and how it operates. So what we're doing is aiming to reduce our exposure to that risk and align our actual assets with our strategic benchmarks. So where I mentioned earlier, we're looking at moving 2.5% of our fund, or 58 million, to the PIMCO Diversified Income Fund. That's one example of taking money out of equities and moving it across to alternatives. And then later in the year, when the Boards of Coast Multi-Asset Credit Fund switches on, that will be a transfer from alternatives to alternatives. And then we have other capital calls in the pipeline. So the key message there is that our actual investments don't line up with our planned benchmarks, but that's a natural position for a pension fund to be in. And the objectives on the investment side are to continually move towards those benchmarks. The other thing that we will be doing this year is reviewing what the benchmark asset allocations are, because a key issue for the fund is the low and probably going to be persistently low interest rates. So where we assess the liability side of the fund, we use gilts. And if gilts are very low, that means you need a large amount of money now in order to fund a certain amount of money in the future. And that raises the pressure on the fund to either bring in contributions or make returns on investments. I think that's everything I had to highlight from this report. I'm happy to take any questions. Sorry, Keith, you're on mute, Keith.
Sorry, thank you. I just want to remind the board, it's not our job to sort of second guess the authority or the scheme manager on the investments, but to see that the process that's being used and so on is appropriate. And I think there's plenty of evidence that that is the case. I would just say, and we've mentioned this before, of course, what Chris has just been talking about, asset allocation, is far more important than individual stock selection. It's getting your asset allocation right. I think there's masses of evidence from the performance measurers that local authority pension funds, 75, 80% or even more of their performance comes from getting the asset allocation right, rather than being in specific shares or not being in specific shares. And the analogy I always like, very simple one, stark one, is that asset allocation is which side of the river you're in, where it's an odd river with current flowing in different directions on both sides of the river. And any 8 of us in a boat on the side going with the current would beat the Oxford or Cambridge 8 in a boat on the other side of the river who are rowing against the current. So asset allocation, it's right that that should be focused, because that really is the important thing. So thank you very much for that, Chris. Okay, well, we've actually been going, and I'm perfectly fine just to carry on. I've been going for an hour and a half, and we just have now one item on the resolution, the disputes resolution procedures, and then some minutes. So we can carry on, but if anybody, as we've been going for half an hour, if anybody feels they'd like to have a comfort break, then I'm happy to break for 5 minutes for that. Raise your hand if you need that. You're back in school now. Okay, if not, we'll carry on. So I think it's over to you now. Neil, I think you're going to do the IDRP.
Yep, thank you, Chair. If I can find it and share it. There we are, there's the report. Yes, thank you. The pension fund has always had the internal disputes resolution in place, which is a requirement of the pensions regulator. And this is a formal process for reviewing a grievance of a member against any kind of query they have on how they've been assessed for benefits or how their benefits have been calculated under the pension scheme regulations. We were aware that the County Council, as an employer, was reviewing their processes on IDRP for their nominated person at their stage. So we took the opportunity to look at our processes and the documentation that we have in place. So just to give some clarification on what a grievance is, a grievance can be against the employer in how they've assessed, for example, somebody's rate of contribution, or typically, let's say, the level of ill health retirement benefit that's been awarded to an individual. And the employer should have a nominated person in place that will revisit that case. That person should be independent. They've not been involved before with that individual's case, and review it to see that the correct processes have been followed. If that person remains aggrieved with that process, it then goes on to what we call stage 2, which comes through to the fund. And that would be reviewed typically by the Chief Executive for Warwickshire County Council, who is able to call on professional advice either internally or externally. Again, if that grievance is still not resolved, then the individual is quite free and able to go on to the Ombudsman. And the Ombudsman can review the process in place, award compensation, and in some cases even get that person put back in the situation that they should have been in if it was found that there was maladministration. Now, obviously, many grievances don't get to that stage and they're resolved informally. You know, it's just simple questions that Vicky's team would resolve, or indeed the employer would resolve. So to go into the appendix, let me just see if I can share this. Again, bear with me a moment. So like I say, we've taken the, no, I'm still in the same one. Sorry, bear with me a moment.
We could see it when you switched, Neil.
Did you?
Yeah, so it's looking at the Explorer. So you switched back to that document. It was actually visible when you switched.
Was it? Is that it now? No, I don't think that's it.
Go back to the other tab on your Internet Explorer that you were on. Flick to the other tab that you're on at the top of the screen. Oh,
I'm struggling. I'm struggling. I'm an old man. Hang on. Let me just bear with. There we are. Got there eventually. Sorry about that. So as I say, we've taken the opportunity to review the documentation, you know, make it more user-friendly, really. But also within this document, we've clarified who would review a dispute at stage 1 against the pension fund, and that would be Chris's role, for example, where he's not been involved in the case before. If somebody comes along and says, "Oh, I've got a dispute, for example, against the amount of transfer that incoming transfer of pension rights that's been awarded," Chris would be able to review that process then. Once the board have had any comments on this and any helpful comments on, let's say, the documentation, how we could improve that in some way, this will then go on to the Staff and Pensions Committee for adoption. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Quite a bit of paper here, but interesting stuff, and obviously essential stuff. Any comments or questions from board members, please? Alan.
I've looked through it and it seems fine to me, Neil. The only thing I did notice was with the appendices in the body of the document, they're labelled 1 and 2, but the actual appendices are labelled A and B. That's on page 53 and 54 of our document pack, pages 4 and 5 of the IDRP.
Good spot, Alan. We can get that stick.
That's all. Thank you.
Eagle-eyed as ever, Alan. Any other comments or questions? If not, thank you, Neil.
I'm back. Sorry about that, but I have had a few problems with the internet this morning.
Sorry, did you hear what Alan was saying or not? All right, Alan, you'd better repeat what you said then, please.
Sorry. You're on mute, Alan.
Yeah, I've just unmuted. The only thing I spotted, Neil, was that the appendices referred to on pages 4 and 5 of the document, 1 and 2, where in fact they're labelled A and B.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you.
Otherwise, fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there any more questions that I may have missed? Sorry.
Nothing that I've had so far, Neil. I'll give members another chance before we move on. One final chance. Any questions or comments, please? If not, thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Okay, well done. Okay, we'll move on now. We just have now, I think, some sets of minutes, starting with the Pension Fund Investment Subcommittee. I think we're back with Chris again now.
Yes, thanks, Keith. So I've only got one comment to make on the minutes. So these are the public minutes of the Investment Subcommittee. The one item you'll notice that we haven't included in this paper is the risk monitoring, which was a public report. And the reason for that is you've seen that anyway in your mainstream papers. What you've received and that I ran through earlier is the same as you ran through with the Investment Subcommittee. But that paper is public and it's still available on the website anyway. Other than that, I didn't have anything to flag.
Comments or questions from the members of the board? Nothing that I can see. So
I've got one question, Keith.
Sorry, Alan. Yes, go on.
Looking at page 78 of the document pack, it's item 11, and then in the resolve section it says formally ratifies £75,000 one-off additional budget allowance to Borders to Coast Pensions Partnership. This is to be used to continue developing the UK and Global Property Fund propositions. And my question with that was, is that something that all the 10 other funds are also doing?
Yes. Yeah.
So we're basically, each of us is putting our stake in to fund this development.
Yes, that's right.
That's fine. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I can't see any. So if not, we will we move on to the next item, I think. Thank you, Chris.
Back to me, is this staff and pensions, is it?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Neil, isn't it? I beg your pardon, Neil. I apologise.
Just sharing the Staff and Pensions Committee minutes, the edited version for the local pension board, that shows any pensions issues that have gone through to them. It's the usual report. If anybody's got any comments, let's see if I can help.
Comments or questions, anyone? Give me a moment to look through them. If not, we'll move on yet again. If anybody wants more time, please, if you don't have a question, but you want more time to think or not, whether or not you have a question, then please indicate that. Otherwise, we will move on. Okay, we'll move on. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, well, we're now on to, I think, our last agenda item, the minutes of our previous meeting. I will just go through these page by page. Just to remind members, the arrangement we now have is that within a couple of weeks of the end, 2 or 3 weeks of the holding of the meeting, Deb sends me draft minutes, which I look at, and if I have any suggestions or comments to make, I make them, and they then go back to Deb, and she sends them out as the minutes that I have. And I use the word in quotes, I have approved the minutes at that stage, but they are not our approved minutes. The point of doing that is that they can come out to you then at an early stage for you to see them nearer the meeting than used to be the case, but they are not the approved or formal meeting minutes of the meeting until you approve them today. So the minutes stand here to be amended, adjusted, added to, deleted from, as you see fit. But hopefully, by you having sight of them closer to the meeting than having them 3 months later is helpful to you. So with that in mind, we will go through them page by page, and you can stop me if we get to any point where you want to raise any question or comment. And also, if you have any comments about the procedure I just described, then please feel free to comment on that too. So we have page 1, not much on that. Page 2, the forward plan, pensions admin activity and performance update. Page 3, that's page 91 on the pack, review of the pensions admin costs and risk monitoring. Page 4, page 92, business plan monitoring. Page 5, 93, and there we have investment update and external audit. I'll come back to audit in a second. Andrew, you're raising your hand.
It was in relation to the external internal audit reports, basically. Not that I was planning to go through them in the public part of the meeting, but just to flag that we obviously have shared them, having talked it through with Rob and myself.
When I said I was coming back to that, I was going to allude to them under any AOB.
That's fine.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. Thank you. But that's what when I say I was going to come back to audit, that was the point I was going to cover. But thank you for that. Page 6, 94. That's minutes and so on, and cybersecurity policy, employer covenant. Page 7 or page 95. Is the last page, and then we have the summary of actions at the bottom. We have the summary of actions at the bottom, which goes over to page 96, page 8, and at the top of page 95 we have the schedule of pensions policies. And as I say, we finish up with the schedule of actions, which I think indication of who's doing what and where we are with them and so on. Any comments or questions on any of those minutes? Or if not, are you happy for me to sign them? Which I don't know whether I forget how we do that these days, but if not, please shout now. And is everybody happy with the new arrangement of having semi-approved minutes or approved by me minutes sent to you earlier than used to be the case with the formal minutes. Are we happy with that? Alan?
I'm happy, yes. And I'd like to say that I thought the minutes were very good this time. And the fact that neither myself nor anybody else has found anything to correct, I think that's a very good step. And I'd like to acknowledge that they're good minutes. Thank you.
Well, of course, I reviewed the minutes, so I'm going to take all the credit for that. The truth of the matter, however, is that I don't recall, if I did have any suggestions or amendments to make, they were so trivial that I've forgotten what they were. And the credit goes to Deb for writing what I agree with you, Alan. They are excellent minutes. So thank you, Deb, for that.
Thank you.
I hope you're listening. Are you, Deb?
I am, yes. Thank you for your comments. They're much appreciated.
Well, they're said, very wholeheartedly. Okay, I think that being it, we've almost finished. Just under A or B, I will say that I think within the past day or so, in response to a request we had, maybe Keith said about this, about audit reports. We've had 2 audit reports sent to us. I'm not going to, open discussion on them now. They're very detailed. And in fact, they are not the sort of documents that are really meant to be presented to boards such as this. They are sort of internal working documents. So they're not the most user-friendly of documents for meetings such as this. But if anybody has any comments or questions, then please take them up online with Chris and myself. Although what I would ask you to do is to copy all members of the board in with any email correspondence that you enter into, so that we're aware of that. I have then talked with Chris, and we've agreed that what we will, the idea of presenting these is to be as transparent as possible. But what I think we will try to do in future is to have some sort of summary report, which will pick up the main points and any outstanding issues, which is the sort of thing I've been I have been involved with an investment trust board in London, and certainly the reports we get there, that was a quoted company, and the reports we get there from the auditors are sort of much more user friendly than these. Highlight what they've done and where things are okay in headline terms, and just highlighting any points which need further attention or thought. And so I think Chris and I will give that further thought and hopefully come back to you with some suggestions for improvement there. Chris, do you have anything to add to what I just said?
No, thanks, Keith. I think that's a good summary.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any comments on these reports or any other business that we haven't yet covered? Okay, looks like not. Well, I speak for myself and I compliment the members of the board, really. I think we have been improving. I don't know whether it's the fact that we're not in the same room or what, but no, seriously, I think since we had some sort of challenging times, 2 years ago, I suppose, no, getting on that way, I think things have improved quite dramatically in all respects, in the way the way the information is being presented and so on, the quality and content of the information, the debate that we have around it, therefore hopefully the usefulness of the board, and hopefully the officers, although the board creates an awful lot of extra work for them, I hope that the existence of the board is now proving to be helpful in, if in no other way, in making sure that they keep on their toes. Not that they necessarily need us to do that, but we are there, and they know that the board will ask what are hopefully sensible, intelligent questions. I come back to a phrase I used in the past. We are here to be a critical friend. We don't have any decision-making powers, but it is our role to try to assist the board in any way that we can, given the structure that we operate under. So that's all I would say. I'll just open it for any final comments or questions, and if there aren't any other, we will move on and close the meeting, but I do give the chance to anybody else to make any comments. No, well, I can't see any. So all I would say is, what was the date of our next meeting? Deb, do you have that to hand? I think we have it in the calendar, don't we?
I'm just double checking.
Is it? No.
It's the 13th of April.
Oh yeah, we got one on the 20th of July then as well. Let me just see if I got the 13th of April. Yeah, and it says 11 o'clock, but I think Dave said that he preferred 10, so we'll change that till 10 o'clock. So it'll be 10 o'clock on the 13th of April. Okay, well, thank you all very much. We've managed to complete that business, considering it was a very full agenda, but thanks very again to the officers for the excellent reports, and thank you, Deb, for your excellent minute taking. All of that helps us enormously. And with that, I will close the meeting and wish you all well. The phrase I use on my emails is mind how you go at these times. Keith, you're raising your hand.
Oh, I was going to wait till you'd finished, but I was just going to ask, if this pack doesn't arrive in the next day or so, whether I could get in touch and get another pack sent to me, because I'd like to read it.
I'm sure you can, Keith. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, Keith. If you drop me a line, that's Deb Mosley.
Right.
You've got my email address, and I'll sort that out for you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, well, make sure you've got Keith's postal address, and if not, you can ask him for it, but yourself. But yes, that will be done, Keith. Just what I suggest, Keith, is let's take some positive action on this. Could we trouble you just to let Deb know when they have arrived, and if she doesn't hear from you within,
I'll leave it till the end of the week, and then there's some if they come or if they don't come, I'll let them know.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you all. I wish you well. I look forward to seeing you before too long.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.